It is one of the greatest engineering feats of the modern world. Every day it helps transport goods and resources across the planet. But how well do you know the Panama Canal? Did you know that before it existed, there was an Isthmus of Panama? Or that thousands of people died building this incredible landmark? Here's what you didn't learn about the Panama Canal. Number 10. The Isthmus of Panama. The first thing you need to know about the Panama Canal is that it wasn't invented in the 20th century. There has always been an Isthmus of Panama. It's a narrow strip of land that connects North and South America. This piece of land is actually a mountain range that formed around 2 million years ago, and it's 43 miles wide at its thinnest point. Because of its unique shape, it served as a natural bridge between the two continents for hundreds of thousands of years. It was used by early indigenous peoples and became an important route for European colonizers as well. In fact, the Spanish used the Isthmus of Panama as early as the 1500s when they were trying to conquer Central America. They built a road across the isthmus that became known as the Camino Real, or the Royal Road. Number 9. Early attempts. For centuries, the idea of cutting through the Isthmus of Panama to create a canal remained a distant dream. It was only in the 1880s that the French began making serious efforts to achieve this goal. A man named Ferdinand de Lesseps, who was already famous for his work in building the Suez Canal, took on the challenge of creating a canal in Panama. De Lesseps had originally wanted to build a canal in Panama, but he was turned down because of the high cost. So instead he went to Egypt, where he built the Suez Canal, which connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. Once the Suez Canal was finished, Ferdinand de Lesseps turned his attention back to Panama. With the backing of the French government and several private investors, he started the French Panama Canal Company in 1879. Construction began in earnest in 1881, and everything seemed to be going according to plan until it was end. De Lesseps was soon plagued by problems such as disease, corruption, financial mismanagement, and most importantly, the realization that the terrain was much more difficult than anyone had anticipated. After years of hard work and millions of dollars spent, the French had only managed to dig a small portion of the canal. Ultimately, they would fail, and in 1889, the company would go bankrupt. Number 8. The Panama Canal Treaty. When the French failed to build the canal, it caught the attention of the United States. At this point, the US was becoming a major world power, and we needed a canal to help with trade. The US saw the Panama Canal as a way to increase its power and influence in the Western Hemisphere. However, there was one problem. The area that the US wanted to build the canal on was part of Colombia, so first the US had to get permission from Colombia to build the canal. However, Colombia refused. The US was not going to take no for an answer. So in 1903, the US helped Panama break away from Colombia and become its own country. The US then signed a treaty with Panama that gave us the right to build and control the canal. The treaty also said that Panama would get $10 million plus an additional $250,000 per year to cover any costs associated with running the canal. Number 7. President Theodore Roosevelt. The construction of the Panama Canal was a pet project of President Theodore Roosevelt. He had been interested in the canal since he was a young man, and he made it a top priority during his presidency. Roosevelt was eager to show that the United States was a world power, and the canal was the perfect opportunity to do it. He set out to build the canal as quickly and cheaply as possible so that it could be used for the upcoming Spanish-American War. To oversee the construction of the canal, Roosevelt appointed a man named John F. Wallace to be the U.S. Minister to Panama. However, Wallace was a career diplomat and knew nothing about engineering or construction. As a result, he hired a man named George Washington Goethals to run the actual construction of the canal. Goethals was up to the task and is considered to be one of the most successful construction managers of all time. Under his leadership, the canal was built on time and on budget, despite all the obstacles involved. Number 6. Jungle warfare. One of the biggest obstacles that the workers faced while building the canal was the jungle warfare. The dense jungle around the canal was home to all sorts of dangerous animals, including biting ants, poisonous snakes, and malaria-carrying mosquitoes. To make matters worse, the workers were often exhausted and hungry, which made them easy targets for the animals. Malaria and yellow fever were rampant among the workforce, killing thousands. In order to combat these diseases, the US Army sent in a group of scientists to develop new ways to prevent and treat them. Their work led to the discovery of how to stop the spread of the diseases, which saved countless lives. Despite the danger, the workers pushed on, and eventually the canal was completed. Number 5. Technological innovations. The Panama Canal was a monumental achievement for many reasons, but one of the most important was the technological innovations that had to be developed in order to build it. The canal required the use of steam shovels, dredgers, locomotives, and other machines that had never before been used on such a large scale. These machines allowed the workers to move earth and rock at a much faster pace, which was essential for completing the canal on time. For example, the dredgers used to dig the canal's locks were some of the largest and most powerful machines ever built at the time. They were able to move enormous amounts of dirt and rock, which allowed the canal to be dug much faster than if it had been done by hand. In addition to the machines, new methods of construction had to be developed. For example, the locks of the canal are some of the largest and most complex structures ever built. They allow ships to travel from one level to another without having to go all the way around the continent. These locks were a marvel of engineering, and they allowed the canal to be built much shorter than if ships had to go around the continents. Number 4. A monumental effort. The construction of the Panama Canal was a monumental effort that required the work of thousands of people. It's estimated that over 25,000 people died while building the canal, both during the French phase and the American phase. Most of the deaths were caused by disease, but many workers also died from accidents while working on the canal. The majority of the workers were Caribbean workers and West Indians who were brought in to do the dangerous and difficult work. They were paid less than white Americans, but more than the indigenous workers. In spite of the low wages, the West Indians worked hard and were essential to the completion of the canal. Number 3. Global trade. Once the Panama Canal was finished in 1914, it quickly became one of the most important waterways in the world. The canal allows ships to travel from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean without having to go all the way around South America. This makes it much easier and cheaper to transport goods and people between the two oceans. For example, the distance between New York and San Francisco is about 2,500 miles. But once the canal opened, ships could travel between the two cities in just a few days. Before the canal was built, the journey would have taken weeks. The canal also helped to connect two continents that were previously isolated from each other. This led to increased trade and cultural exchange between the Americas. Number 2. Strategic significance. The Panama Canal was not just important for trade, it was also strategically significant for the United States. The canal gave the U.S. Navy control of the seas between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. This meant that the Navy could move ships and personnel quickly between the two oceans. The canal was especially important during World War II, when the U.S. was fighting in both theaters of war. During the war, the canal was heavily guarded by the U.S. military to prevent enemy forces from using it. The canal also played an important role during the Cold War. It allowed the U.S. to quickly move troops and supplies to various parts of the world in order to contain the spread of communism. Even today, the canal is an important part of the U.S. military's global network of bases and installations. Number 1. Environmental concerns. The construction of the Panama Canal had a major impact on the environment. The canal disrupted the flow of water through the region, and this led to major changes in the ecosystem. For example, the construction of the Gatun Dam created a large lake that flooded much of the surrounding forest. This caused the extinction of many animal species that were not able to adapt to the new environment. In addition, the canal allowed invasive species to enter the ecosystem. For example, the introduction of the African frog resulted in the extinction of several native Panamanian frogs. Despite these concerns, the canal has been expanded several times in order to meet the growing demand for global trade. In recent years, Panama has taken steps to protect the environment around the canal. In the 1990s, Panama began reforesting the areas around the canal, and this has helped to restore some of the damage that was done. Additionally, Panama has invested in renewable energy sources in order to reduce the canal's impact on the environment. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into history. Also, let me know in the comments what you thought of the video and what other topics you want us to cover in the future.